Here we've got the much anticipated Fellow Aiden Precision Brewer. This is a batch brewing coffee maker designed by the people who created the Fellow EKG kettle. We've been lucky enough to secure this unit before any production units have hit Australia, and by the time that this video is released, we'll have plenty of stock available with the most updated firmware. Because this is the demo unit, it doesn't have the most updated firmware, but it still gives us a really good idea as to what this machine offers, and of course the hardware that isn't going to change. This coffee brewer is a domestic coffee maker. However, I would not be surprised if you start seeing these pop up around in cafes, small coffee bars, as the user interface is just so easy to navigate. As you can see on the front here, there's just one button, just like the EKG where we've got the one button and the display. There's multiple different ways to maneuver this. You can press, you can hold, you can swivel, all to change the settings and the modes in the Fellow Aiden. The reason you would do this is for selecting your profiles, which you can store a massive amount of different profiles on the Aiden. The new firmware update is going to have app connectivity where you're going to be able to create, save and customize profiles from your phone, have them then fed directly into the Aiden, which you can brew. While some people love app connectivity and being able to control things, if you just want to make an instant cup of coffee, the Aiden's got a feature called Instant Brew. This is essentially just a pre-selected profile where you go in, select how much coffee you want out, and then it's going to automatically calculate how much coffee you need to put in. Super easy, no frills, and I love it because in the morning when you wake up, the last thing you really want to do is like play around with ratios and numbers and maths. And no thank you, that is not what I want to be doing early in the morning. The included thermos in this batch brewer can hold 1.5 litres, and by the time that the production units hit Australia, we're actually going to see a newer design where the flow is going to be so much better, and I'm so glad that they've made that change. Now, as you can see, when it comes to the baskets for this brewer, we've got a couple of options. Here on my left, we've got a blue handled basket, and here on my right, we've got a green handled basket. Essentially, this is a flat bottom brewer, and while they call this the cone basket, it's actually a trapezoid basket, and it holds Filtropa filters, as well as Fellow's own brand of paper filters, which will be coming out soon. In the meantime, before they land, we'll also have the Spectrum filter papers available. On this note, I also want to mention that the Aji Circle Filter fits pretty good on this basket, and there might be a cheeky little trapezoid Aji filter in the works. So something to keep your eyes peeled about, and we'll have some more information about that in the description. The Fellow Aiden is actually quite clever. If you've got a brew that is too small and you've accidentally put the blue basket in, it's going to prompt you and it's going to say, hey man, you actually need the green basket. So we'll love to see that. The Aiden does the thinking and you can focus more about other things rather than thinking or brewing. Or actually anything. It pretty much does everything. You just have to grind your coffee and put it in. Now that we've discussed the baskets, I want to quickly tell you about the thermos. This holds 1.5 litres. The water tank also holds 1.5 litres. So as long as you're brewing a little bit less than that, you're going to be good to go. And 1.5 litres is a lot of coffee. So typically, if you're having a large cup of coffee, which is what I have, that sits at around 300 mils. Generally, most people would have 250, but if there's multiple people, I totally get it where you'd want to have larger amounts of coffee. But if there's multiple people all waking up around the same time and you want to make larger amounts of coffee, this is when the thermos server comes in handy. Just like when you're using the incorrect basket size, if you're brewing 2 larger cups of coffee and you're using a glass server, or you just put your cup directly under, and this time for whatever reason you've forgotten, it's going to actually prompt you to use the thermos, which is really smart, and it avoids a big mess, which we love to see. Again, the Fellow Aiden is thinking about things before you've even thought about them. Now, on this note, I just want to talk about the lid real quick. As you can see, it's got a funny design. It's got this tiny little hole at the top of where the lid is. It's made from stainless steel inside with some plastic components and of course a silicone seal. So it's going to keep your coffee inside quite hot. The reason for this little hole at the top is it sits right underneath here at the base. So essentially all you have to do is put this into the machine. It's going to line up and you don't have to worry about taking the lid off, putting it back on, having drips hit the lid and then making a mess at the top of the lid, which you might see in other batch brewers. Nice, thoughtful design that is easy to use and quite intuitive. Now, when you first get your Fellow Aiden, one of the very first things that I recommend you doing is setting the altitude on this machine. The reason for this is water actually boils at different temperatures depending on the altitude of your location. So just before you do anything else, go ahead and set your altitude on your machine, and that's going to help you have a more accurate and precise water temperature when you're brewing coffee. To load the Fellow Aiden and get it ready to make coffee, first we have to lift the lid up. Next, we have to have an idea of how much coffee we actually want out. So if we're making 1 cup or 2 cups or 1 big cup or 3 small cups, you have to work that out first. Essentially, once you work that out, you're then going to know which basket you want. Obviously, you also have to consider what coffee you're brewing. So if you're brewing a light roast and you want to use the light roast profile, that's going to give you a general indicator as where you want to start. But obviously this is still not going to be perfect. You're going to want to actually brew the coffee once, taste it and see whether that profile was brewed well for that coffee. Once you do that and you know that the profile is fit for that coffee, you're then going to be confident brewing that for future brews. Now, a super thoughtful design that I love to see about this is when you remove the basket. So after you finish brewing and you're going to remove the filter basket and the spent coffee grounds, all you have to do is lift up the handle and pull it up. Now, just like the Hurry-O Switch immersion brewer where you've got a little valve on the bottom, this stops the drips. You can fill this up with water right now and it's not going to drip. I love this feature so much. It's so thoughtful and it just works so well in your workflow. So presuming we're going to make a coffee now, next thing you need to do is you need to add your filter paper. So this is the single cup brewer. Here with me, we've got one of the Spectrum filters. I believe it's called the U shape and it's the 2 cup. We're going to put this in our basket. Now at this point, it's totally up to you. Some people like to pre-wet their filter. I totally get it. Whether you're going to do that under a tap and just remove that makes a quicker workflow. Alternatively, you can just pump some hot water through this, but that does take a little bit more fiddling around when you're going through starting a profile and then stopping it. It just takes a little bit more work. So what I like to do is just run this under a cold tap. And now I know the first thing you're gonna say is, oh my God, but brew temperature. Just hold on a second. We're gonna get to that. Next, we're going to put this into the Fellow Aiden. You can hear an audible click as that valve is then opened. Next, we're going to grind up some coffee and put it inside. Okay, we have a very chaffy washed Ethiopian coffee. It smells amazing, but it's very chaffy. So we're going to add this to our basket. You see how much chaff there is. We probably lost 1 gram doing that, but YOLO. Anyway, so now we've got our 20 grams of washed Ethiopian coffee inside. I know, this time we haven't pre-wet the filter, but we're just gonna run with it. Now at this point, the Fellow Aiden is all loaded up. It's got the correct basket, we've got the thermos down below, we've got the coffee loaded in and the filter inside as well. The last thing that we didn't check is that we need to make sure that the shower screen is on the correct setting. So because we're using the green basket for 20 grams of coffee, we need to just make sure that this is flicked over to the correct position. Now that that's done, we can put it down and we can talk more about the settings and the different profiles that we have option to use at this point. Now there's 3 main ways of brewing. Number 1 is instant brew. Essentially, as I said before, this is a pre-selected profile that you're able to run just at the click of a button. Number 2 is your custom profiles. These are custom profiles that you've either created yourself or have been shared with you. And this is so awesome because now that you have the correct water, you've got the correct coffee, maybe a roaster has roasted up their coffee and they wanted to share the brewing profile with you. The Aiden can allow that. Next up, after we've got the custom profiles, we've also got one other way where you can brew with the Fellow Aiden. This is called scheduling. And essentially what it means is you can say, cool, I'm waking up at 8 a.m. in the morning. At that point in time, I want to have a coffee. As long as you've got the time synced up to this, it will be able to start brewing your pre-selected profile that you've prepared the night before. And the awesome thing about this is on the night before, when you're setting this up and you're scheduling, if you don't have the correct amount of coffee basket or the thermos here for larger brews, it's actually going to prompt you that night. So it's not like you're going to be waking up in the morning disappointed without any coffee. Obviously, the one downside to this is it does require you to load in your coffee that night. So that means that you're going to be grinding coffee beforehand and it's going to be sitting in here. If that's a deal breaker, then that's not for you. But for everybody else, I think it's a really convenient way to have freshly brewed coffee at the time that you want it. Now I want to show you a custom profile that I've put into this machine. Now for the firmware on this demo unit, I'm not actually capable of connecting it with my phone just yet, but yours is going to allow you to do that. So when you receive your Aiden, you'll be able to pump in your profile, customize it all from your phone. I did that directly through the device, and to be honest, it wasn't that hard. It's not something that I would be crazy if I didn't have an app. I would imagine though that knowing Fellow and what they're like and how they prioritize user experience, if they come out with an app for this, it's going to be phenomenal. So even though you don't necessarily need the app, I definitely recommend downloading it, having a play, and seeing if it's worth using for you. So let's make a cup of coffee. First thing we need to do is we need to exit this sleep mode. So we're going to press this once, and these are where our options are. We've got instant brew, we've got guided brew, edit profiles, schedule, settings. This is our main menu, and essentially it's how you're going to change your profiles and select the profiles, as well as setting up that scheduling brew that I mentioned earlier. Because I'm ready to go, I've got my coffee loaded and I want to brew right now, I also want to show you a specific profile that I've made for this coffee. First things first, we're going to click on guided brew. Once we click this button, it's going to take us to our custom profiles and our preset profiles. Essentially now we can toggle between these profiles just by turning this knob here. It's super intuitive and it's very easy to do. We are going to come all the way down to my profile where I've customized the name as My Brew 2. We're going to click that. And yes, we want 2 cups. This is going to create 30 mils of coffee inside using a 20-gram dose, just like we've prepared. We're going to hit that one more time. It's telling us that we need 20 grams. So if we didn't already know that, then we would be prompted one more time to use 20 grams of coffee inside this machine. We're going to click that one last time. It's good to go. Now, as soon as you hit that button, it's going to start brewing. That did not even take longer than 5 seconds to heat up that water. But there's one last thing I want to tell you. I'm not sure if you remembered, we didn't pre-wet that filter using hot water. The reason why I did that is because on this brew, the way that I've created the profile, the first blooming stage of water is actually being poured at around 70 degrees Celsius, which is an incredibly low temperature, and it's a very unique style of brewing. And the reason why I did this was a little bit naughty, just to showcase that the Fellow Aiden is capable of having a very large temperature selection. And with the new firmware update, apparently I'm hearing that we're going to have an even larger amount of control. Next up in my profile, we've then got a second pour. This pour is at 95 degrees Celsius and it's going to go for around 45 seconds. In fact, all of my pours are around 45 seconds and I found that this brewed really well for this coffee. So at this stage, we don't really need to be here. If it's early in the morning, we could go have a shower, brush our teeth, get ready for the day. Or if it's during working hours and this is your midday pickup, you could totally just set this up, put some grounds in, go do your work, and in the background, you've got your own barista brewing up a coffee inside your own living room. This machine is very quiet. It's going to run in the background and you won't even notice it. In fact, the loudest piece of equipment here is going to be my coffee grinder, followed by my kettle, followed by the Fellow Aiden. Comparing this to heating up an espresso machine, it's still super, super quiet. But the one thing that you do have control over the volume is that when it's finished brewing, it's going to let you know via a little beep, and you can actually control how loud this beep is through the settings menu. Now, there's one last thing that I want to talk about with this machine. When you're brewing coffee, depending on your water usage, the hardness of your water, and the different mineral composition that you're putting into the tank and into the machine, you're actually going to need to descale this. In order to descale, it's recommended to use a liquid descaler and to follow the instructions provided from the manufacturer of that descaler. You're also going to be prompted when it's time to descale, which is around every 3 to 4 months. And the Fellow Aiden is even going to measure how much water is actually going through it and when it's time to descale. And it's done. We're ready to taste our coffee. Now that it's done, what happens next? Well, like I said, we need to remove this. Of course, it's optional. I prefer to remove this first, and that prevents any drips from falling down, but you could also just take this and enjoy your coffee. And a final option that I've been doing is I like just to pop the basket out. That then seals up the valve, so we're not gonna have any more drips. I'm then gonna leave the lid open while I go enjoy my coffee. And because the lid's open, it's quite easy for me to look over and say, oh, okay, I need to go ahead and change this. Guys, it's as easy as that. We've finished brewing and we're going to pour out our hot cup of coffee. And that's it. It's as simple as that. Spot on. Like I said at the start of this video, the Fellow Aiden Coffee Brewer is available at thebasicbarista.com. If you've got any questions about this batch brewer or any of the products that you see here, drop us a comment and we'd love to get to it. That's all from us. We'll see you in the next video, and happy brewing.